Did you know that Hoyo is a very big fan of Wagner's Ring cycle? They're such big fans they made an entire game inspired by it. Said game is called Genshin Impact. The Ring cycle, also known as the Ring of the Nibelung, is a music drama written by the famed German composer Richard Wagner. Drawing upon Germanic folklore and the epic saga Nibelungenlied, Gnosticism, and the idealism of Schopenhauer, Wagner created an epic opera so critically acclaimed it became a symbol of 19th-century German high art. As an opera, the Ring cycle is very long, spanning 4 cycles across 4 different days. The first cycle is the Rheingold, second is the Valkyrie, third is Siegfried, and fourth is Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods. This may or may not have been the reason why Tevat has gone through 4 samsara so far and not 2 or 3 or 5. For ease of understanding, I have structured the video essay into 4 parts, correlating with the 4 cycles of the Ring. Part 1. The Rheingold and Nibelungenlied. At the start of the opera, we were introduced to the Rheinmaidens, who were the daughters of the Rhine River in Germany, hence, Rheindaughter in Genshin. They were guarding the Rheingold, which was a cursed treasure that can be made into a magic ring. The ring, they said, would give the power to rule the world if the bearer denounced love. This is when Nibelung came in. Alberich, as in Kia Alberich in Genshin, belonged to a race of dwarfs called Nibelung. Now, Alberich was a very salty man, so upon hearing that only when the ring-bearer renounces love can gain its power, he went and cursed love, taking the gold from the Rheinmaidens. With the Rheingold, he forged the Ring of Power and declared himself the Lord of the Nibelungs. With the power of the ring, Alberich enslaved the Nibelung race and ordered them to mine up gold for him. However, his hold on the ring was short-lived, for Wotan, more commonly known as Odin, also sought the ring for his own gain. See, the problem with Odin is that he was neck-deep in debt to the giants Fasolt and Fafnir. He requested them to build him a castle, and in return, he would give them Freya, the goddess of fertility and love. Fasolt was in love with Freya, but Fafnir only wanted Freya's golden apples, for without her golden apples, the gods would lose their youth. But now that the castle was done, he didn't want to pay them Freya anymore, so he ordered Loge, a god of fire, to find a suitable payment for him. And the news Loge brought back was the news of the ring, for nothing was more valuable than love but the ring. As a result, Wotan and Loge went and robbed Alberich of all of his gold and the rings. But before Wotan could literally grab the ring from Alberich and put it on his finger, before they could get their hands on the ring, the salty Alberich had put a curse on it. Anyone who does not possess the ring will covet it, and anyone who does will live in fear of losing it, and will ultimately be robbed of it and killed by its next owner. This is the curse of the Nibelung. So naturally, when Wotan and Loge gave Fasolt and Fafnir the gold, they were not satisfied and demanded the ring too. Wotan reluctantly agreed and handed it over, but Fafnir, tempted by the ring, killed his brother Fasolt and fled alone with the ring. Upon stealing the ring, Fafnir transformed into a dragon. At the end of the first cycle Das Rheingold, Wotan and the gods stepped into their new castle, Valhalla. Loge, unhappy with the gods, contemplated burning it down, but he didn't do it. Yet, the Rhine daughters cried, denouncing the gods as hypocrites and cowards. If you find this familiar, that's right, it's the inspiration for Tolkien's Lord of the Ring and also Genshin's Khaenri'ah plot. As you have noticed by now, a few names from Khaenri'ah are directly taken straight out of the Ring cycle. The Rhine daughters, who became Rheindaughtr, one of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah, Alice's Hexenzirkel friend, and Albedo's mom. Alberich is Kia's surname and one of the leading knight clans in Khaenri'ah across both the Crimson Moon dynasty and the Eclipse dynasty. Notably, Enfordas, the regent of Khaenri'ah Eclipse dynasty when the Cataclysm happened, Kia's father, and Kia are all members of this clan. Needless to say, it was a bit suspicious that King Hermann was conveniently indisposed for Enfordas the Alberich to take charge during the Cataclysm. Meanwhile, Wotan is the other name of Odin, whose other epithets appeared in Genshin as Hermann, the one-eyed king and final king of Khaenri'ah who became conveniently indisposed during the Cataclysm, and presumably also the Vinster king mentioned by Danes, and Hroptidr the Wise, one of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah. Now, what this means is that the Hoyo writers have a tendency to mix and match different figures together. Also, because they chimera the story with additional details from a bunch of other different sources like Nibelungenlied, Gnosticism, the idealism of Schopenhauer, and even Cthulhu mythos, so it's pretty understandable that the Genshin story is only based on Wagner's opera and it's not exactly one-to-one in terms of characters and plot. They can split one character into many, like the case with Hroptiter and Hermann both being Wotan in Wagner's opera, or the case of the three Rhine daughters, who all got merged into one single Rhine daughter. Or, in the case of Fafnir and Alberich the Nibelung dwarf, the Wagner's characters can be merged into one in Genshin. Nibelung the Dragon King, the king of dragonkinds who summoned the abyss power of the second who came to rebel against Celestia, and presumably, also the cause of the ring being cursed with the abyss power in Khaenri'ah, one of the culprits of the Cataclysm alongside Wotan. Well, yes, Khaenri'ah plot actually also had the ring and not just the gold. It was actually mentioned by Zervan way back in Sumeru Patch. According to Zervan, right during the Cataclysm, he met a blonde swordman who clutched a ring tightly in his hand. Said blonde swordman claimed that he only survived because he was cursed and he was last seen traveling with another blonde person who looked like the main character. To add to this, recently in Natlan Archon Quest, Capitano claimed that the Khaenri'ah curse, despite cursing every pureblood Khaenri'ah with immortality, did not stop Capitano himself from getting hit with putrefaction over time, but Dainsleif is entirely young and pretty, and Capitano theorized that Dainsleif must stay young for another reason. Well, piercing all of this together, it's quite easy to see that the cursed blonde swordman wandering around was Dainsleif, who was traveling with the Abyss sibling at the time. And the ring he was clutching in his hand was very very likely to be the ring of power made from Rheingold, the cursed ring of the Nibelung, which did, in fact, curse Dainsleif with both immortality and eternal youth. So who's Dainsleif in Wagner's opera? Why, it's Fafnir, the giant that fled with the ring and turned into a dragon. Hence, why Dainsleif's constellation is literally, get this, snake ring. Yeah, let's just say that that constellation name is the opposite of subtlety. However, I would like to note that the ring doesn't look like it's in Dainsleif's possession anymore as of the latest Archon quest. At least, his model doesn't have any visible ring on his hands anymore. Of course, Dainsleif isn't the only Fafnir here, nor is Fafnir the only character thrown in to make Dainsleif. There is also Nibelung, which was supposed to be a race of dwarves but became a dragon in Genshin. But when you dig deeper and ask yourself why did a race turn into a dragon, you'll realize that all of Khaenri'ah is supposed to be the Nibelung race, or in this case, Nibelung's race, here. While the Nibelung were depicted as dwarfs in Wagner's cycle, the reality is that they were the names for the royal family of the Burgundians. And the history of the Burgundians is an interesting one. The Burgundians were a Germanic people who originally lived in the Baltic region before moving down to the Rhineland-Burgundy area, next to the Rhine River. They were later conquered by the, also Germanic, Frankish Empire and later on considered to be Franks themselves. Incidentally, the Franks have been directly referenced in Genshin with the names of Caribert and Clothar. The fictionalized accounts of the Burgundians' demise were told in the form of oral history and then written down as poems in Germanic and Nordic folk traditions as the Nibelungen Saga. And here is where we can start to see the connection between Nibelung the dragon and Khaenri'ah's royal line. First off, by now it's no longer unusual to see people being revealed to be part dragon in Genshin lore. In Natlan, it was blatantly spelled out to us that the Natlan people are actually a mix of Fan's humans and the dragon's fire, which was stolen by the sage from the Pyro Dragon King and given to them. Again, in Fontaine, Egeria made the Oceanid humans from the source water she got off the original Hydro Dragon King. They were incomplete humans without a proper shell, so to speak, and only had the soul, Numa and Ugia. But at the end of the Fontaine Archon quest, with Nouvelette's decision to give them his blood, whatever that blood was, their shell was completed, and they became full humans. Hence, with Nouvelette's blood in them, Fontaine humans are now literally part dragon, same as Natlan people and their fire. Secondly, Khaenri'ah has been shown to be very blatantly Germanic, with influences from Fan's Greco-Roman unified culture. In the Enconomia quest, when we looked for books with Injur revealed that the Abyss Order and Khaenri'ah believed that they descended from Fan's people like Enka instead of being Vishap people themselves. This would track with the IRL history, where the invaders, the Germanic Franks and Burgundians, both got reverse assimilated by the Roman culture of the Gaul region and became French. Furthermore, Caribert and Clothar both originated as names from the Merovingian dynasty of the Franks. In Genshin, they are distantly related to the main royal line of King Hermann and the more highly ranked Alberich. What does this all mean? It means that Khaenri'ah is based off the Burgundians, who are, in fact, Nibelung the race. This means that, like Natlan and Fontaine people, the reason why they are different from Teyvat people, and the reason why the pureblood Khaenri'ah got immortality while the half-blood became Hilichurls, also known as dwarfs, is because Khaenri'ah pureblood are part Nibelung, as in, the half-dragon people of Nibelung, like the people of Natlan and Fontaine with their respective dragons. Overall, when translated to Genshin term, the beginning of Teyvat can be summed up as thus. A long time ago, there were fans and the dragons. Fans arrived at the Genshin world from space and defeated the ruling dragon kings, creating the Four Shades and establishing a kingdom of heaven for his humans. There is probably more to the story than what was told to us in the Before the Sun and the Moon book, and there might or might not have existed a period of cooperation between the two factions. But from what we have known of so far, in an attempt to rebel against Celestia, Nibelung, the big boss of the all-dragon kings, summoned the second who came, the Cthulhu Abyss power from outer space. However, he failed and retreated back to the Abyss and built Khaenri'ah, where he created his own race of part dragon or full dragon ancestry, the race of the Nibelung. Initially, Khaenri'ah was ruled by the Crimson Moon dynasty, who did some experiments with not really descender parent Harry with some towers, intended on creating a person who could wield the power of the Pale Moon. We don't know what happened next, but a dynastic change happened, and the Eclipse dynasty, or more literally translated, the Black Sun dynasty, took over. The Alberich as a clan remained powerful throughout both dynasties. Under the Eclipse dynasty, Khaenri'ah militarized its equipment, at one time quoting Otto von Bismarck from real life. Sometime around 500 years ago, Khaenri'ah ran into an energy crisis and made the executive decision to swap from azazite, the energy harvested from the ley line native to Teyvat, to Abyss power, also known as the forbidden knowledge from outer space, and what we now know to be phlogiston, the celestial opposite of the Abyss power. To accomplish this, they poured resources onto Chemia, the forbidden alchemy that would eventually destroy everything. Probably came from Nibelung's first summoning attempt, honestly. Around the time of the Cataclysm, remnants of the Crimson Moon dynasty hatched a plot to take back the rule from the Eclipse dynasty, and this plot had something to do with the Pale Moon, which is the red moon of the Abyss seen in the Abyss siblings' flashback of the Cataclysm and in Arlecchino's lore. In the background, the Eclipse dynasty recruited 5 heroes who were supposed to save Khaenri'ah from an upcoming calamity. However, later on, these 5 would become corrupted, presumably by the Abyss power, and did nothing to save Khaenri'ah. They would later be known as the 5 Sinners: Hroptiter the Wise, Vedrfolnir the Visionary who is Dainsleif's brother, Rheingold who is Albedo's mom, Sertaligi the Foul who is Child's master's master, and Rerir Rocker of Salnari. Arguably, they were the culprits instead of the protectors. Gold is, of course, Rheingold, the one who invited the Abyss and lost the cursed gold. Sertaligi the Foul is a combined character of Surtur, Loge, and Loki, with Surtur being the flame giant that would battle Freyr in Ragnarok and bring forth the flame that would destroy the world. Meanwhile, the Logi part of Sertaligi is a reference to Loge in Wagner's Ring Cycle, who himself is a combined figure of Loge, a demigod of fire, and Loki, the trickster god, from Norse myth. In the Ring Cycle, Logi is the demigod of flame assisting Wotan to steal the ring, and at the same time, also the god who lent Brunhilde the flame to set heaven on fire. Hroptiter the Wise is Odin's epithet and probably shared the same sin with King Hermann, the other name of Odin, for Odin is the original sinner of the Ring Cycle. Sertaligi being Loki means that Skirk is probably the equivalent of Hel, the ruler of the underworld with the blue complexion of a corpse. Now, Rerir Rocker of Salnari is rather obscured, but in Norse myth, he is the father of the Volsung clan, which became Siegmund, Sieglind, and Siegfried in Wagner's cycle. The second part of his name is more illuminating. Sol means son, and Nari is one of the sons of Loki. Depending on the version, either Nari, or his brother Narfi, was turned into a wolf. So Rocker of Salnari means Avenger of the Sun Wolf, which tells us that Rerir here is supposed to be a nod to Narfi, the other son that also sometimes turned into a wolf. At the same time, the Chinese title is actually Moon Hunter, which is a direct connection to the wolf that eats the moon during Ragnarok, and said wolf is, sometimes, Fenfor himself or his son, Heitai Hirvitnissen. So after connecting all of this together, we can see that Rerir in Genshin is supposed to be a combined figure of Rerir and Fenfor, and, in any case, should play the same role of wolf eating the sun as Fenrir in Ragnarok. And of course, Dainsleif himself is a nod to the Jormungandr, the Ouroboros that would swallow the world and also a son of Loki. with Hroptiter as Odin, Rerir as Fenrir, Surtalagi as Loki, Skirk as Hel, and Dainsleif as Jormungandr, we can see that the crew that was prophesied to start Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, or in this case, the Cataclysm, had been assembled. At the same time, the royalty of the Eclipse dynasty also recruited the Abyss sibling in some project for an unknown purpose, as testified by Clother. Probably as Baldr. At around the same time, Gold, also known as Rheingold and Albedo's mom, discovered the heart of an unknown god in an expedition. She did some experiments with it and dropped off Albedo at Mondstadt, not necessarily in that order. As a result of her experiments, non-physical beings from space were summoned and given physical vessels according to Alinas, who was one such being and considered Rheingold his mom. However, there was something wrong with the alchemical process, because according to both Durance and Alina's testimonies, these beings had a warped view of the world, literally, and saw distorted things as beautiful and beautiful things as distorted. In addition, she also created the teleporting Karajan wolves, which went on record to terrorize Khaenri'ah population and Teyvat. More than that, these beings, at least, for the wolves and Durin, carried abyss distortion within them. Anyone who fought against them or got hit by them also got hit with a massive dose of abyss corruption, as was what happened to Chio the Tiger, Kitsune Saigu, and the Bloodstained Knights. Presumably, Gold was trying to create gold, or to be more exact, the Rheingold, the cursed gold of the Nibelung. At an unknown time during the Cataclysm, the One-Eyed King, King Hermann, an epithet of Odin and the last king of Khaenri'ah, became conveniently indisposed. And Fordas, who also only had one eye, of the Alberich clan took over as the regent. Incidentally, if Vera's Melancholy, written by Alice, is to be trusted, the King Ermin, and or Hroptiter the Wise, may or may not have merged with Nibelung the dragon by then. Anyway, the Alberich clan may or may not have tried to steal the Rheingold from Rheingold for whatever purpose, either good or bad. But we do know that at the end of it, the Rheingold had become a ring, which ended up in Fafnir Dainsleif's hand by the time of their arrival at Sumeru alongside Enfordas. The Abyss sibling was fighting with Dainsleif at the time, but they could not complete their journey together. The next thing we know, the Abyss sibling was trying to wake us up and run away, no Dainsleif in sight. And then, the Sustainer arrived to declare that we are humans' arrogation and kick us into modern Teyvat. As a result of the Cataclysm, the Irminsul got corrupted by the Abyss, half-blooded Khaenri'ah became Hilichurls like Caribert, while full-blooded Khaenri'ah became cursed with immortality. Danes got something different, probably cursed by the ring to turn into a dragon, or in Genshin terms, the snake ring constellation, like Fafnir. Like Brunhilde, the Sustainer went into deep sleep, waiting for the plot to wake her up again. Part 2. The Valkyrie, Kiana, and Gnosticism. At the start of the Valkyrie, we are shown the actual start of Odin's Messi's plan to regain the ring from Fafnir. He slept with Erda to father Brunhilde. He also pretended to be a human called Vulsa to sleep with a Volsung woman and father the twins, Sieglind and Siegmund. Incidentally, in the original myth, the Volsung Saga, from which Wagner chimera his story from, Vulsa is actually the grandson of Odin and the son of Rerir, whose namesake became one of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah in Genshin as Rerir the Salnari, moon hunter. Anyway, after Siegmund and Sieglind were born, Odin then plotted for Sieglind and Siegmund to be separated. He stirred up a conflict with the Nighting so that they would raid the Volsung, kill the twins' mother, and kidnap Sieglind. Upon being kidnapped, Sieglind was enslaved and forced to marry Hunding. On the day of the wedding, Odin, in the guise of an old man, slapped a sword, not hung, to a tree trunk and went off. Hunding could not draw it out, because Odin did it entirely to give Siegmund a weapon. Yes, Odin is an ass. Zeus style. Growing up, Siegmund became an outcast who wandered around. One day, he wandered into Hunding's house and met Sieglind while Hunding was out. Siegmund fell in love with Sieglind while knowing that she was his twin sister. Yes, it's incest. Probably not in Genshin though due to PG-13 rating. Probably. Anyway, Hunding came back, they had a duel scheduled. Siegmund drew out the sword not hung that Odin left for him and believed that Odin had promised victory to him with the sword. He couldn't have been more wrong. In heaven, Odin initially instructed Brunhilde, his other daughter, to ensure Siegmund's victory. But upon being scolded by Erda, Odin retracted his statement while wink-wink at Brunhilde to signal that he actually didn't retract his statement. Brunhilde understood, somewhat, and went to notify Siegmund that the sword wasn't blessed anymore and he needed to go back to heaven with her, albeit Sieglind couldn't follow. Siegmund didn't want to leave behind his twin sister/wife, so he refused and threatened Brunhilde. Moved by his threats, Brunhilde decided to grant him victory against Odin's official order. But it's all for naught anyway, because during the fight with Hunding, Odin appeared directly to shatter not Hung. Siegmund was stabbed to death, Brunhilde fled with Sieglind, Odin then casually killed Hunding for the lulz before chasing after Brunhilde. Also, it turned out Sieglind was pregnant with Siegfried, Siegmund's child. As Sieglind made her escape, Brunhilde and Odin had a confrontation, and Brunhilde revealed that she knew Odin actually wanted her to do so all along. Yes, it's a very messy scheme. As punishment, Odin stripped Brunhilde of her Valkyrie status and turned her into a mortal woman. He then put her into a deep sleep in the middle of a ring of fire, supplied by the fire god Loge. Odin declared that anyone who feared his spear shall never pass through the fire. But actually, it's all going according to plan for Odin. If you're familiar with Honkai Impact, you are probably familiar with how Hoyo has always had a thing for Norse mythos. Namely, the job Valkyrie in Honkai is the same job Valkyrie in Norse mytho. Even more than that, a good chunk of Honkai Impact story was taken from Germanic myths as well. For one, Siegfried, Kiana's dad, was named after Siegfried, the hero of the story and the incest child of Siegmund and Sieglind. Meanwhile, Kiana got handed the role of Brunhilde, with the whole plot of Siegfried grabbing the clone Kiana instead of the real Kiana, Bianca, originating from the switcheroo between Kriemhilde and Brunhilde as Siegfried's wife in Nibelungenlied and the Ring Cycle, albeit Hoyo changed the relationship between Siegfried and Brunhilde and Kriemhilde from love triangle to father and two daughters. In Nibelungenlied, Siegfried was in love with Kriemhilde first and courted Brunhilde for Gunther, Kriemhilde's brother, in exchange for her hand in marriage. In Wagner's cycle, Siegfried was in love with the Valkyrie Brunhilde first, then Kriemhilde, known as Gudrun in the opera, poisoned Siegfried so that he would forget about Brunhilde and fall in love with her. As Siegfried mistook Brunhilde for Kriemhilde, or vice versa, in Honkai 3, Siegfried mistook K423 for Bianca, the original Kiana. Either way, Brunhilde lighting herself on fire to burn down heaven in Wagner's cycle is one of the source inspirations for Kiana becoming Flame Scion and Finality, taking down the god of Honkai world. Also, Valkyrie. Effectively, Kiana in Honkai Impact 3 even got the entirety of Brunhilde's ending in the Ring Cycle, albeit portrayed in a positive light due to mixing with Gnosticism. I'll talk about that later in Part 4. Working backward, we can see that currently, the Sustainer is asleep, same as Brunhilde at the end of the Valkyrie and same as Kiana at the end of Part 1. And what did she do before she went to sleep? She arrived at Khaenri'ah to stop the arrogation of humans, us, from leaving. In Wagner's Ring Cycle, Brunhilde appeared before Siegmund to warn him against his belief that he was promised victory by Odin. Speaking of Wagner, Wagner's opera was not only based on Nibelungenlied but also on Gnosticism. You see, Wagner was a huge fan of Schopenhauer, a popular philosopher who promoted the value of Schopenhauer aesthetics, which is, in short, the ideology that art should be made for the sake of idealistic art and not reality. At the same time, Schopenhauer also blended and repackaged Christian, Gnostic, Buddhist, and Taoist values into a not very coherent framework without demanding for the existence of an actual god. To put a very long story short, Schopenhauer believed that humans should reject their innate sense of will to live to aim for the better good, regardless of whether there is a higher power demanding them to do so or not. Wagner's Parsifal is a very good execution of this idea, if you're familiar with that work, and that one is also referenced by Genshin, by the way. But more importantly, reading Schopenhauer's work influenced Wagner to the extent that he started to get hooked on Gnostic stories, including that of their world building. You see, in early Christian writings and Gnosticism, Jesus isn't the only savior. He had an actual bride of Christ called Sophia, who is a savior goddess on her own. Sophia and Jesus are syzygy. They are both twins and other halves at the same time. At the beginning of the story, Sophia, the goddess of wisdom and light, was lured by the demiurge and corrupted, falling into the material world. She was jailed, with her memories locked away, unaware of her true power. To rescue her, the Gnostic god reincarnated into the mortal world as Jesus to bring Gnostic, or knowledge, to humanity and to save Sophia. By now, it's pretty clear that a lot of Genshin world building is based on Gnosticism, such as the names and terms for Gnostic, Archon, Barbaloth, Pneuma, Ugia, Hypostasis, etc. Not unlike Genshin, Wagner also utilized Gnostic text and philosophy for his world building, and in his case, the story of the syzygy Sophia and Jesus were mixed with that of Signy and Sigmund from the Volsung saga, turning into Sieglind Brunhilde and Siegmund Siegfried respectively. As Sieglind was jailed by Hunding, Sophia was jailed by the Demiurge. As Siegmund arrived to rescue his twin but was killed by Hunding and false god Odin, Jesus arrived to rescue Sophia but was killed by the Demiurge. As Jesus resurrected to defeat the Demiurge and save Sophia, Siegmund left behind a descendant, Siegfried, who took on the same role as savior to defeat the Demiurge Hunding. As Jesus rescued Sophia and woke her from the dream of the material world, Siegfried woke up Brunhilde, who, in turns, gained awareness and knowledge upon his death and burned down the material world. It's not an exact match, because Wagner chimera it, same as the Hoyo writers, but the general theme is very much in line with how Jesus and Sophia are depicted in Gnosticism. So basically, MC twins in Genshin are inspired of Sieglind and Siegmund and of Sophia and Jesus, albeit without incest. Probably. Hopefully. Anyway, while it's not clear which twin is actually Sieglind and which twin is actually Siegmund, personally I think they switch around. It's rather easy to see that the whole twin separated and then reunited again is copied and pasted from Sieglind and Siegmund's storyline. As Sieglind was kidnapped by Hunding, the Abyss sibling working with the Abyss Order under the guidance of a prophecy. Sieglind and Siegmund managed to reunite only for a short while before Brunhilde appeared to warn them against such reunion. Like Jesus and Sophia, one of the twins probably died to start the fourth samsara cycle of Genshin, correlating with the death of the savior as Siegmund and his return as Siegfried. But if Sieglind and Siegmund are the MC twins, who are Siegfried and Brunhilde in Genshin? Well, if you consider the sustainer to be Brunhilde, then everything starts to become much clearer. Part 3. Siegfried, Brunhilde, and the Sword of Twilight. In the third cycle of the opera, Siegfried grew up raised by Mime, the brother of the titular Alberich who stole the ring. Sieglind died in childbirth, leaving Siegfried only the broken sword of his father who was also his uncle, Siegmund. Mime raised Siegfried for the sole purpose of killing the dragon Fafnir and stealing the Rheingold ring back for Mime, so he wasn't exactly a very good guardian. On his part, Siegfried himself was also an odd case in that he didn't know what fear was. He demanded that Mime reforge not hung, his father's sword. But Mime couldn't do this, so Siegfried left. This is when Odin came in, again. He disguised himself as a wanderer and asked for hospitality from Mime, which he didn't receive. So he made some vague threats at Mime, hinted to him that Siegfried could reforge the sword, and that Siegfried would kill Mime. Obviously, this compelled Mime to do the only logical thing left. He hatched a plan to Siegfried. When Siegfried came back, he forged his own sword, not hung. Mime promised him a drink after he defeated Fafnir, but of course, unbeknownst to Siegfried, that drink was poisoned, per Odin's courtesy. Speaking of Odin, he met up with Alberich the Nibelung dwarf, who was actually still around and planning to take back the ring to rule the world. Odin taunted Alberich some more, which compelled Alberich to go and warn Fafnir about Siegfried. Sabotage job done, Odin rode away on his high horse, satisfied that he had won the Worst Grandfather of the Year award. As planned by Odin, Siegfried successfully killed Fafnir with the sword not hung. Fafnir, in his last moment, regained his sense and warned Siegfried of the curse of the Nibelung, but Siegfried, confident in the fearlessness that allowed him immunity to the ring, didn't think much of it. As Fafnir died, Siegfried drank the dragon's blood, gained the power of the dragon, and, most importantly, the ring. Armed with the power of the dragon, Siegfried could now hear the thoughts and ill intentions of Mime. So of course when Mime faked congratulating him to give him the poisoned wine, Siegfried stabbed Mime to death, fulfilling Odin's prophecy. Still wanting to know fear, Siegfried listened to the woodbird's advice and arrived at Brunhilde's place. In the background, Odin declared to Erda that he no longer feared the end of the gods, Ragnarok, reasoning that his true inheritance, the love of Brunhilde and Siegfried, would redeem the world. He appeared before Siegfried and was defeated, Siegfried smashing the symbol of his power, the spear of the Aesir. And with his victory, Siegfried made his way to Brunhilde, waking her up from her flaming slumber. Well, the fourth cycle of the story is long as hell, but since it's related to the discussion here, I'll also do a quick summary. Long story short, Siegfried fell in love with Brunhilde and began to know fear, which made him susceptible to the curse of the Nibelung. And yes, that's also incest. Siegfried went off to meet the pair of brothers and sisters, Gudrun and Gunther, who ruled the Joseon dynasty. And yes, that's actually the other epithet of the Nibelung in real life, so you know they're all being set up as the parallels to the Nibelung, Alberich, and Mime. Hagen, the chief minister of the Joseon dynasty and secretly a fan of Alberich, suggested to Gudrun and Gunther that they should totally marry Siegfried and Brunhilde, in that order. Gudrun, who was inspired by Nibelungenlied's Kriemhilde, fell in love with Siegfried, in a parallel to Fasold, Fafnir's brother who chose love of Freya over the ring. To get Siegfried to love her and in a move paralleling Mime, she poisoned him so he would forget about Brunhilde. Gunther tricked Siegfried into cosplaying as Gunther to woo and defeat Brunhilde. Brunhilde was defeated, again, and was forced to marry Gunther. Recognizing the ring on Siegfried's finger and thinking that Siegfried had betrayed her, Brunhilde told Hagen and Gunther how to kill Siegfried, which was by the hole on his back that was not covered by Fafnir's blood. The Rheinmaidens appeared again to warn Siegfried of his impending death due to the ring, but he didn't listen and refused to return the ring to them, repeating history, mirroring Fafnir, Alberich, and Wotan, basically all the people who got affected by the ring's curse. Hagen, on his part, only wanted the ring because he only wanted to rule the world and didn't need love, so he killed Siegfried. Like Fafnir in his last moment, as he lay dying, Siegfried remembered his love for Brunhilde. Brunhilde, upon his death, gained wisdom. She realized that Siegfried loved her all along, so she took the ring from Siegfried. She declared that Siegfried's death had atoned for the gods' sins. She ordered for a funeral pyre for Siegfried and told the Rheinmaidens that they could regain the ring after the fire had cleansed it off the curse of the Nibelung. In the final scene, paralleling Sieglind who chose to die after Siegmund was killed, Brunhilde immolated herself and, in accordance to Odin's will, told Loge to set fire to heaven. The end of the gods arrived as prophesied and also the name of the last cycle, Twilight of the Gods, Götterdämmerung. As the gods burnt down from Loki's Ragnarok, the Rhine River burst its banks, and the Rheinmaidens reclaimed the ring. In the part 2 of the video, we have established that Brunhilde is probably the Kiana XB, again, and Fafnir is Danes. However, as I have mentioned before in part 1, Hoyo writers generally tend to chimera their inspirations in the same way Wagner did to his. As such, a character might not necessarily only correlate to one single inspiration but can be a result of several inspirations mixed into one, and a single inspiration can be spread across many different characters. This is true for both Wagner's opera and Genshin's take on the ring cycle, as the whole parallel set up between all the ring holders and the Siegmund-Sieglind-Siegfried Brunhilde parallel had already been done by Wagner before Hoyo even added their Gnosticism Cthulhu Commedia dell'arte into the mix. This is why in Honkai 3, the actual Siegfried did not die, and Brunhilde setting the gods on fire became Kiana embracing finality and ending the samsara, with no death actually happening in the finale of Honkai Impact Part 1, RIP Himiko though, the other Siegfried. In this case, as we dig deeper into Wagner's Siegfried, it becomes clearer what role Dainsleif is originally supposed to play beyond the curse of the Nibelung. Siegfried, also known as Sigurd, is a semi-historical figure in Germanic legends and stories. He was based off many different figures, including the Merovingian dynasty Sigebert I, who was married to Brunhilde of Austrasia and killed by Chilperic I, who was the husband of Fredegunda. The other inspiration for the mythical Siegfried is Sigurd the Snake in the Eye, who had, you guess it, an Ouroboros in his eye. And that Sigurd Snake in the Eye had a brother, whose name was Halfdan. Well yes, that Halfdan. Also, have I mentioned that Dainsleif's title back in Khaenri'ah was Twilight Sword? As in, the Twilight of the Gods Götterdämmerung? So yeah, he's the Siegfried turned Fafnir and Alberich from the ring cycle. In Teyvat, the story we know is a play in a dream, written by someone. Fate is predetermined by the constellations, and normal humans cannot change that fate, as shown to us by Mona in the second Golden Apple Archipelago event and recently once more in Natlan AQ. However, this doesn't mean that it's impossible to change fate. It just takes a descender, someone from outside the Teyvat system, to do so. This is why MC is needed to be the witness for Simulanka Durin's story to be acknowledged as real, and why Sitlati specifically asked MC to change Mavuka's fated death in Natlan. But MC isn't the only descender capable of changing fate, anyone from out of Teyvat system can. This has already been shown to us since Fontaine, where one of the space whale's materials told us how it changed child's fate into one of a whale by sheer proximity. Effectively, this means that the Abyss power, which originated from the second Descender, the second who came, can change people's fate as well. This is what happened to Child, and this is what happened to Dainsleif as well. He got the role of Fafnir because he was actually Siegfried, cursed with the role of Fafnir after he drank the blood of the dragon and gained the cursed ring of the Nibelung, which was why his curse acted differently from the rest. Like Siegfried in Wagner's Ring cycle, and as forewarned by the Rheinmaidens in the last cycle, after he drank the blood of Fafnir and gained the ring, he had gained the fate of the dragon in the play, exactly like what happened to Siegfried in the Ring cycle. But wait for it, it gets even funnier. For one, Enforda's Alberich, the last regent of Khaenri'ah during the Cataclysm, is actually based off another character in another Wagner's opera, Parsifal. In Parsifal, Enfordas is the king of the kingdom of the Holy Grail. He was stabbed by the holy spear, Longinus, which was based of the spear that killed Jesus, and cursed to forever bleed from it. Amfortas, the Fisher King, was supposed to guard the Holy Grail, but upon being stabbed, he set off a chain of events that eventually led to the arrival of Parsifal, one and only pure fool that could cure the cursed stabbed wound. At the end of the play, Parsifal stabbed him, and he was cleansed of sin, the end. Basically it's the exact same plot as Siegfried vs. Odin in the Ring cycle. And Siegfried is Dainsleif, so guess he's gonna stab Amfortas and had already stabbed Amfortas to cleanse him of sin. Secondly, Hagen, known in Nibelungenlied and the Ring as the Thief of the Ring and an obvious parallel to the dwarf Alberich, also appeared in Genshin. More specifically, in Alice's play in Valurium's Mirage Summer event. In the play, the thief stole something, which was depicted as light, back to the underground lightless kingdom, and going with him to Khaenri'ah is Idaia, who is an Oceanid, a daughter of water, like Rhine daughters. Well, luckily, our Genshin Hagen has declared in his hangout that he's not gonna accept the script handed to him and he would try to change the fate of the kingdom, so the play in the dream might be rewritten after all. Lastly, back to Brunhilde, since she is actually still asleep right now, this means that Cycle 3 and 4 of the Ring haven't happened yet. She is still waiting for Siegfried Dainsleif to wake her up, and if Honkai 3 is any indication, he is going to wake up Brünnhilde instead, who may or may not be our Abyss sibling. While Brunhilde is the one who set the world on fire in the Ring cycle, in Nibelungenlied, it was Brünnhilde, Gunther's sister, who was the true love of Siegfried and the one who set the world on fire after his death. So, it's actually pretty flexible as to who will burn down heaven and take down the gods. Either way, looking at Honkai 2 and 3's take on the Ring cycle and Nibelungenlied, it's pretty clear that at least one of them, Brunhilde and Brünnhilde, would try to burn down heaven with Siegfried's fire and end the age of the gods, bringing about Ragnarok. And in admitting their own sin, they would finally cleanse the world of sin, from both the Nibelung dragon's sin and from Celestia's sin. For if Fontaine Archon Quest and Natlan lore had told us anything, justice will be done, though the heavens fall. Anyway, I know this video essay has been hideously long and complicated with all the digression, so here is a summary of my conjectures explained in this video. A diagram makes everything easier to understand, I think. As for the part 4 of the video, I'll update when Hoyo gets there. If I remember to. Probably.